The Great Pyramid of Giza holds a secret written in starlight. This video explores the profound connection between ancient sky watchers and the stones they left behind. A journey into the astronomy of lost civilizations and its influence on early architecture. You will gain a new lens to see human history, one where every temple and tomb becomes a page from a forgotten cosmic textbook. Why would cultures separated by vast oceans point their greatest monuments toward the same slice of sky? What silent messages did they build into mountains of stone, waiting millennia for us to decode? We will travel from the solstice stones of Salisbury Plain to the serpent shadows of Maya pyramids, uncovering a global puzzle of celestial ambition. This story reveals a hidden science that challenges everything we thought we knew about our ancestors. What do you believe is humanity's deepest motive for reaching toward the stars? That simple vertical stick, or gnomon, cast a shadow that was the first blueprint. It was a tool of profound simplicity and power. For a community with no magnetic compass, no printed maps, the sky was their only unchanging guide. This practice, what scholars call the celestial compass, went far beyond finding north. It was about anchoring a society to the rhythm of the cosmos itself. The sun, moon, and stars provided a perfect repeating calendar. The longest day, the shortest night, the moment a bright star first reappeared at dawn. These were not just dates. They were divine appointments, signals for planting, for harvest, for ceremony. To build a temple aligned to the winter solstice sunrise, as at Newgrange in Ireland, was to literally capture a sliver of the reborn sun deep within a tomb. It meant engineering a structure so precisely that for a few precious minutes, once a year, light would travel down a long passage to touch a sacred space. That is not casual stargazing. It is a deliberate, hard-won fusion of architecture and astronomy. These builders used the landscape itself as part of their instrument. A notch between two distant hills could become a perfect sightline to mark a solar event. A standing stone placed on a horizon would frame the rising of a particular star. Their world was not flat, but a living dome where celestial bodies moved along predictable paths, and they learned to write those paths in stone. So how would your sense of time and direction change if your only reference was that dome above? You would not simply check a clock. You would feel the year turning in your bones, watching for the sun's slow migration along the horizon. Your north would be defined not by a needle, but by the pole star's fixed pivot in the night. This intimate, embodied knowledge was the first and most crucial tool. It allowed them to transform random piles of stone into permanent celestial observatories, setting the stage for the even more ambitious projects to come. But these grand celestial visions required a translator, a way to bring the sky down to earth with exacting precision. The true genius of these early astronomers lay not in advanced technology, but in their mastery of primitive instruments of astonishing simplicity. Without telescopes or written mathematics, they engineered tools that turned observation into architecture. Consider the humble plumb bob, a weight on a string. It gave them a perfect, gravity-defined vertical line. From that single true reference, every other angle and alignment could be born, paired with a simple water level, a trough of water that finds a perfectly flat plane regardless of the terrain. They could establish a foundation that was both level and square across immense distances. These were the fundamental engines of architectural astronomy. One of the most elegant tools was the merkit, used in ancient Egypt. It was essentially a sighting rod with a plumb line, often used with a forked stick. An observer would line up the merkit with a specific star, using the plumb line to ensure it was perfectly vertical. By noting where the star rose or set relative to the rod over successive nights, they could trace its path with remarkable accuracy. This simple device allowed priests and architects to chart the heavens and transpose those charts onto the desert floor. Then there was the knotted cord, a tool of measurement that became a sacred object. In Egypt, the ceremony known as the stretching of the cord was a ritual of profound importance. The king and a priestess, representing a goddess, would each hold a stake. A cord knotted at intervals was stretched taut between them. By aligning this cord with a specific star, they were not merely measuring a distance for a temple's foundation. They were performing a divine act, physically linking the terrestrial blueprint to the celestial order. The cord was both a practical ruler and a cosmic thread. For establishing long, straight lines or perfect right angles over open ground, they employed even more ingenious methods. Historians of engineering suggest the use of reflected sunlight. Imagine a long, narrow basin filled with still water, acting as a mirror. By sighting along the reflection of the sun or a bright star, they could project a perfectly straight line across kilometers. This technique could explain the breathtakingly straight processional avenues found at some ancient sites. An illustrative example of their observational sophistication might be the so-called Indian circle method. Envision two concentric circles of wooden posts. An observer stands at the center of the inner circle, looking out through a gap in the outer circle toward the horizon. By marking where the sun rises or sets through that gap day after day, they can track its slow migration north and south with the seasons. This simple arrangement of sticks in the ground creates a permanent, large-scale calendar. Some researchers propose such methods were used at high-altitude sites like Machu Picchu, where the crisp, clear air and dramatic horizon made the sun's movements a spectacular, measurable event. So we are left with a compelling question. Can true sophistication exist without complex technology? These cultures answered with a resounding yes. Their mastery was not in inventing gadgets, but in extracting profound accuracy from basic principles of geometry and physics. They understood the behavior of light, water, and shadow with an intimacy we have largely lost. This deep, practical wisdom with simple tools set the unshakable stage for the first great astronomical monuments. It meant that when a society decided to build a mountain to touch the stars, they already had the earthly means to do it. This symbolic drive transformed architecture into something far greater than a collection of walls. A temple became a cosmic model, a physical representation of the universe itself. For many ancient cultures, a sacred building was not merely a place of gathering. It was the very center of the world, an axis mundi connecting the earth to the heavens and the realms below. Scholar Anthony Aveni describes this as a profound desire to make the immense and intangible sky something you could literally walk inside. This was architecture as a three-dimensional calendar and a permanent stage for ritual. To achieve this, builders encoded the cosmos into every aspect of design, using orientation, light, proportion, and sacred number. The most direct method was through dramatic light and shadow. A building could be oriented so that on a specific day, like a solstice or equinox, the rising sun would shine directly down its central axis, illuminating a statue or altar deep within. This turned a single sunrise into a yearly spectacle, a moment when the sun god seemed to enter his house, but the effect could be even more intricate. The interior of a structure was often designed to capture moving patterns of light. The Great Pantheon in Rome offers a stunning example. Its vast, coffered dome represents the celestial vault, and at its peak is the oculus, a single circular opening to the sky. Throughout the day, a beam of sunlight pours through this eye, sweeping across the marble floor and walls like a slow, divine spotlight. It marks the hours and the seasons with silent, majestic precision. On significant dates, the light would fall upon specific architectural features, linking time, space, and ceremony into one experience. Beyond light, the very form of a building held symbolic meaning. Vaulted ceilings were crafted to mimic the dome of the night sky. Pillars and columns often stood as representations of world trees or the mythical pillars believed to hold up the heavens. The proportions of rooms, the number of steps, the count of columns all were frequently dictated by numbers sacred to that culture's cosmology. The Maya, for instance, embedded their complex calendar cycles into the tiered levels of their pyramids. These were not arbitrary aesthetic choices. They were deliberate codes, making the structure a permanent expression of a people's understanding of cosmic order. If your home was designed as a model of the universe, what single feature would be the most essential? For these architects, it was the entire building, every element working in concert to mirror a celestial blueprint. This profound need to create a manageable, human-scale version of the cosmos provided the ultimate motivation. It explains why such staggering effort was expended to haul stones for generations. They were not just building monuments, they were constructing reality itself in stone, creating a stable center in what they saw as a chaotic and spiritual universe. This foundational concept of architecture as cosmic model set the stage for the most ambitious and enduring application of all: the creation of immense, permanent stone calendars that could mark time for millennia. Silhouetted against the pale English dawn, the Sarsen trilithons of Stonehenge hold a geometry of shadow and light. This is our first monumental mystery, a ring of stone that has whispered of lunar secrets and solar power for thousands of years. While the summer solstice sunrise famously slices between the great uprights to strike the altar stone, the deeper story of Stonehenge may be written not just for the sun, but for the moon. Its arrangement is not a simple circle. It is a sophisticated machine built of rock, one that some researchers believe could track the complex dance of celestial bodies to predict events like eclipses. The key lies in its multiple layers of alignment. The outer ring of massive Sarsen stones capped by lintels is famous, but look closer. Inside that ring stand the smaller, distinctive blue stones, transported an incredible distance from the Precession hills in Wales. Their journey alone speaks of a purpose beyond mere construction. They held a significance so profound it warranted a 200-mile journey across land and water. Then there are the often overlooked features. A ring of 56 pits known as the Aubrey Holes circles the monument just inside the bank. The number 56 is crucial. It represents a cycle. The moon's orbit has a slight wobble, a shift in where it rises and sets on the horizon, which completes a full cycle roughly every 18.6 years. Remarkably, if you mark the moon's extreme rising points over this long cycle, and you move 3 marker stones each year around a circle of 56 positions, you return to your starting point in just over 18 years. This 56-year cycle, a multiple of the lunar cycle, could have been a primitive computer for anticipating when the sun, earth, and moon would line up perfectly, the conditions for an eclipse. Further supporting this idea are the 4 station stones that once stood in a rectangle around the monument. The long sides of this rectangle align with the most extreme rising and setting points of the moon, while the short sides point to the sun's solstice positions. This creates a permanent stone framework for the entire celestial theater. So was Stonehenge a temple, an observatory, or a grand statement of cosmic order? The answer may be all 3. It was a place where the cyclical nature of time, written in the sky, was made permanent and tangible on the earth. The effort to build it, to align it, to bring sacred stones from a distant land, tells us that understanding and perhaps influencing these cycles was of paramount importance. It was a colossal attempt to bring the erratic, powerful moon under a measure of stone-based prediction. This Neolithic computer, if that is what it was, stands as a testament to a deep, patient observation of the heavens. Its silent stones challenge our assumptions about prehistoric science, prompting us to look to other ancient landscapes where the sun itself was the primary architect. Deep within the Great Pyramid, hidden passages tell a story of stellar obsession. Two narrow shafts, one angling north, the other south, pierce the massive stone heart of the structure. For a long time, they were thought to be simple ventilation, but their design reveals a far more celestial purpose. These shafts are not horizontal. They are precisely angled tunnels pointing directly upward from the king's chamber toward the night sky, as it was over 4,500 years ago. The northern shaft targeted Thuban, the star that served as the pole star in that ancient era. The southern shaft aligned with the belt of the constellation Orion. This was no architectural accident. It was a deliberate cosmic aiming system, built into the very fabric of the pharaoh's eternal resting place. This leads us to one of the most compelling and debated ideas in archaeoastronomy, the Orion correlation theory. Proposed by researcher Robert Bovell, it suggests the ground plan of the three main Giza pyramids mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt. When you map the pyramids and overlay the stars, the correlation is visually striking. More than that, the theory posits that the southern shaft from the king's chamber pointed directly toward Orion's belt at its highest point in the sky around 2500 BC, the estimated time of the pyramid's construction. For the ancient Egyptians, Orion was not just a constellation. It was the celestial form of Osiris, the god of resurrection and the afterlife. The Milky Way was seen as the heavenly Nile. The pharaoh's soul, upon his passing, was believed to journey through the Duat, a starry netherworld, to join the imperishable stars and become one with Osiris, achieving eternal life. The pyramid itself was a machine for this divine ascent. Its iconic shape may have represented the Benben stone, the primordial mound from which the sun god first emerged at creation. Each pyramid was a ramp to the heavens, a frozen ray of sunlight, a mountain that could launch the soul skyward. The precision of its construction screams of astronomical intent. The Great Pyramid sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with an error of less than a fraction of a degree, a feat requiring profound knowledge of star transits. On the equinoxes, the sun casts a shadow on the pyramid's north face that creates a play of light and shadow, making the structure appear bisected, a dramatic solar alignment witnessed even today. So were the pyramids merely elaborate tombs, or were they resurrection engines encoded with a stellar map? The evidence suggests they were both. The body was prepared for its earthly rest, but the architecture was designed for a celestial voyage. The shafts were spiritual launch tubes guiding the pharaoh's ka, or soul, directly to its stellar destination. Critics of the Orion theory point out that the correlation is not perfect and that the Nile's bend does not mirror the Milky Way as precisely as some claim. Yet even the skepticism highlights a crucial truth. Whether mirroring Orion exactly or not, the pyramids are undeniably saturated with astronomical meaning. Their alignment, their form, and their internal geometry all speak of a culture that built its vision of eternity directly from the blueprint of the night sky. This ambition to anchor human destiny to the stars was a powerful force, one that would soon inspire builders across the globe to look upward and translate what they saw into stone. Across the world, another civilization perfected the art of building time itself. At Chichen Itza, the Maya pyramid called El Castillo stands as a monumental calendar cast in stone. Twice each year, on the spring and autumn equinox, a spectacle unfolds that feels like pure magic. As the sun sets, the stepped terraces of the pyramid's northwest corner cast a series of triangular shadows against the illuminated staircase. These shadows merge to form the undulating body of a great serpent, appearing to slither down from the temple at the summit to meet its stone head at the base. This is the descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, a phenomenon of breathtaking precision. To achieve this, the Maya architects needed far more than just a good eye. They required an intimate mathematical understanding of the sun's path, the pyramid's exact latitude, and the specific angle of each staircase. The structure itself encodes their cosmology. The pyramid has 9 terraced levels, representing the 9 levels of the underworld in Maya belief. Each of its 4 stairways has 91 steps. When you multiply 91 by 4, you get 364. Add the final step of the upper platform, and you arrive at 365, the complete solar year. This was not a hidden code. It was a public, immutable calendar, a mountain that counted the days. This architectural genius served a society governed by celestial cycles. The Maya used multiple, interlocking calendars. The 260-day Tzolk'in, used for ritual and prophecy, meshed with the 365-day Hab solar calendar. The grand convergence of these cycles, a calendar round, occurred only once every 52 years, a time of profound renewal and potential upheaval. El Castillo was the anchor for this entire temporal system. It transformed the abstract passage of days into a physical, communal experience. On the equinox, thousands would gather to witness the gods' descent, a moment that blurred the line between astronomy and theater, uniting the community under a shared cosmic sign. The pyramid's design held further marvels. Clap your hands at its base, and the sound echoes back as the distinctive chirp of the Quetzal bird, a sacred creature linked to the serpent deity. This acoustic trick, likely intentional, added an auditory layer to the visual miracle. Furthermore, El Castillo was not alone. It formed the heart of an astronomical complex. Nearby stands El Caracol, a round tower often called the observatory. Its narrow, strategically placed windows align with the extreme rising and setting points of Venus, a planet the Maya watched with intense devotion, associating its cycles with war and rulership. So how does public architecture shape a society's relationship with time and the divine? For the Maya, it made both utterly inescapable and beautifully communal. The pyramid did not just mark time, it performed it. It turned cosmic events into civic celebrations, embedding a sophisticated understanding of the heavens into the daily life and spiritual practice of every citizen. This mastery of celestial cycles through architecture invites a fascinating comparison with another culture that watched the same stars from a different continent, a culture that carved its observatories not from stone, but from the living rock of a mountain. High on the arid plateau of southern Peru, the earth itself becomes a canvas of impossible scale. The Nazca lines are not built upward like the pyramids, but etched into the desert floor, a gallery so vast its masterpieces are only visible from the sky. For centuries, their purpose was a perfect enigma. Were they landing strips for ancient astronauts, as some wild theories suggest, or something far more profound and human? A compelling answer lies not in visitors from other worlds, but in a deep, desperate conversation with the sky above. The most enduring theory, championed by the dedicated researcher Maria Reich, sees these geoglyphs as a colossal astronomical text. She proposed that many of the long, straight lines function as sightlines, pointing precisely to the horizon where key stars, constellations, or the sun would rise or set on significant dates. The famous hummingbird glyph, for instance, has a long, straight beak that some alignments suggest points directly to the solstice sunrise. The massive spider figure may correlate with the constellation Orion. And the cluster of small dots near the monkey glyph is thought by some to mirror the Pleiades star cluster, known as the Seven Sisters. For the Nazca people living in one of the driest places on Earth, the Pleiades held life or death importance. Its first appearance in the pre-dawn sky marked the coming of the rainy season in the distant Andes, the source of all water that would eventually flow down to the coastal valleys. Watching for these stars was not stargazing for pleasure. It was an act of survival, a way to know when to prepare for the vital water that would nourish their crops. This is where astronomy meets urgent, practical ritual. The lines themselves may have served as ceremonial pathways. Imagine a community gathering at the edge of a giant figure. As the Pleiades broke the horizon, priests or shamans would begin a procession, walking the length of a straight line or tracing the outline of a sacred animal. Their movement across the giant drawing was a physical prayer, a ritual walk meant to summon the celestial forces that governed water and fertility. The scale of the geoglyphs suggests the audience for this ceremony was not human but divine. They were messages writ so large that only the gods in the sky could see them in their entirety. By walking the lines, the people became part of the message, activating the prayer with their footsteps. It was a form of sympathetic magic, using the pattern on the ground to influence the patterns in the heavens. So we must ask, were the Nazca lines a giant star map or a ritual landscape for summoning water? The evidence suggests they were inseparably both. The astronomical alignments provided the calendar, the sacred timing. The geoglyphs provided the ritual space, the physical interface for human appeal to the cosmos. They turned the entire desert into a temple without walls, where the relationship between earth and sky was performed on a breathtaking geographic scale. This practice of landscape-scale astronomy was not unique to Peru. Across the vast Pacific, on isolated islands, another culture would develop its own stunningly precise method of celestial navigation, using the stars not to mark ritual paths on land, but to chart daring pathways across the open ocean. The Cambodian jungle guards a stone cosmology of staggering ambition. Angkor Wat, the world's largest religious monument, presents an immediate puzzle. Its main entrance faces west, a break from tradition for a temple dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, whose domain is the east. This architectural anomaly is the first clue that its builders were following a different kind of blueprint, one drawn from both myth and the measured movement of stars. While its primary orientation is toward the setting sun on the spring equinox, a more speculative but fascinating theory suggests its grand layout may mirror the constellation Draco as it circled the celestial pole over 1,000 years ago. To understand this, we must step into the Khmer Empire's unique worldview, a powerful fusion of imported Hindu cosmology and deep indigenous beliefs about ancestors and the sky. For them, the temple was far more than a place of worship. It was a functioning model of the universe, designed to harmonize earthly power with cosmic order. The entire complex is a precise representation of Hindu cosmology. The 5 iconic central towers symbolize the 5 peaks of Mount Meru, the mythical axis of the world. The vast surrounding moat is not for defense but represents the cosmic ocean. The concentric galleries and courtyards map out the celestial realms. This symbolic architecture was infused with astronomical intent. Researcher Elena Manica's detailed analysis of the temple's dimensions reveals a structure meticulously planned around sacred numbers and celestial cycles. The lengths of causeways, the counts of pillars, and the spacing of windows often correlate with the lunar calendar and the vast time cycles known as yugas. The galleries themselves may have functioned as a sophisticated solar observatory. Narrow windows and specific doorways could have been positioned to allow shafts of sunlight to penetrate the inner sanctums only on the solstices or equinoxes, marking the high holy days with beams of divine light. One of the most breathtaking features is the immense bas-relief depicting the churning of the ocean of milk, a foundational Hindu myth. In the story, gods and demons cooperate to churn the cosmic ocean, using a giant serpent wrapped around a mountain to produce the nectar of immortality. Some scholars see this as more than myth. They propose it is an allegory for the slow, grand wobble of Earth's axis, a cycle called precession that takes 26,000 years to complete. In this interpretation, the serpent represents the sinuous path of the celestial pole through the constellations, with the mountain as Earth's axis. The churning becomes a metaphor for the passage of cosmic time itself, encoded in stone for those who could read it. So, can a single building encode an entire civilization's worldview? Angkor Wat stands as a powerful argument that it can. It is theology, astronomy, and statecraft solidified into sandstone, a permanent attempt to anchor a kingdom to the eternal rhythms of the cosmos. This profound desire to build models of the universe was not confined to jungle temples or desert plains. It would find perhaps its purest expression in a small, enigmatic artifact from a much later age, a device so advanced it would force the modern world to completely rethink the technological capabilities of the ancient past. The sun's journey was the first great clock humanity ever learned to read. Its dependable arc across the sky, shifting north and south with the seasons, governed the most essential rhythms of life: when to plant, when to harvest, when the floods would come, and when the land would rest. For ancient cultures, tracking this solar year was not a matter of casual interest. It was a direct line to survival. The most critical markers in this annual cycle were the solstices and equinoxes, the 4 astronomical pivots that divide the year. The winter solstice, the shortest day, marked the sun's symbolic death and rebirth. The summer solstice, the longest day, was a celebration of light at its peak. The equinoxes, when day and night are equal, represented perfect balance. Anthropologists note these were not merely practical dates on a calendar. They were moments of immense spiritual potency, believed to be times when the boundary between the earthly and the divine grew thin, when communication with gods and ancestors was most possible. This profound significance demanded more than just memory. It demanded architecture. Builders became celestial engineers, devising stone instruments to capture these fleeting moments with permanent, dramatic clarity. They created what we now call sun daggers and light boxes. A sun dagger is a precisely engineered slit or window that allows a single blade of sunlight to pierce a dark interior chamber, striking a specific mark only on a solstice or equinox. A light box uses a similar principle, but often to illuminate a carved symbol or altar deep within a temple. These were not passive alignments. They were active, performative devices that transformed a building into a timepiece. To achieve this, architects had to master 2 distinct concepts. The first is a direct solar alignment, where a structure is oriented so that on a key date, the sun itself is visible from a specific point, like the sun rising directly over a distant mountain peak as seen from a temple doorway. The second, more common, is a solar-based alignment. This focuses on a fixed point on the local horizon, like a notch between 2 hills or a specially placed standing stone. The builders would mark where the sun rose or set on the solstice from a fixed observation point. That horizon marker then became a permanent, unchanging reference. The sun would return to that exact spot year after year, century after century. A powerful example of this solar reverence is found at Machu Picchu. High within the sacred complex sits the Intihuatana, a beautifully carved granite pillar whose name translates to the hitching post of the sun. During the solstices, the sun stands almost directly overhead at this latitude. The pillar casts no shadow at noon on these pivotal days, creating the powerful illusion that the sun has been literally tethered to the stone, prevented from continuing its journey and plunging the world into permanent darkness. Rituals performed here were acts of cosmic maintenance, a partnership between humanity and the heavens to ensure the sun's return and the continuation of the cycles that sustained all life. So how does marking the sun's cycle create a sense of permanence in a chaotic world? It provides an unchanging anchor. In a life subject to unpredictable weather, illness, and conflict, the sun's reliable return was a promise of order. By building that promise into stone, a society declared its place within that eternal order. It transformed anxiety into ceremony and uncertainty into a scheduled, sacred event. Yet the sun's reliable partner in the sky moved to a more complex and mysterious rhythm. one that would challenge ancient astronomers to build even more sophisticated stone computers to decipher its patterns. While the sun's path was a dependable annual rhythm, the moon moved to a far more mysterious and complex beat. Its silvery light ruled the night, pulled the tides, and became deeply entwined with ancient concepts of time, fertility, and transformation. Unlike the steady sun, the moon is a shapeshifter, cycling through phases from dark to full every 29.5 days. But its most challenging pattern unfolds over a span much longer than any single observer's life. This is the lunar major and minor standstill cycle, a slow dance lasting roughly 18.6 years. During this cycle, the points on the horizon where the moon rises and sets shift north and south, reaching a maximum extreme, a major standstill, and then a minimum extreme, a minor standstill, before beginning the long swing back. To recognize this pattern required not just careful observation, but the patient transmission of knowledge across generations. It demanded a cultural memory written in something more permanent than stories. It demanded architecture, incorporating these lunar extremes into stone-created temples to the moon's enigmatic dance, often sacred to feminine deities linked to cycles of birth, death, and regeneration. At the Neolithic tomb of Noath in Ireland, the massive curbstones surrounding the mound are carved with intricate spirals, circles, and radiating lines. Some researchers, like Martin Brennan, have proposed these are not mere decoration. They could be sophisticated maps of the moon's phases and its longer standstill cycle, a permanent record of celestial patterns meant to be read by initiates. Tracking the moon presented a unique challenge. The sun's solstice points are fixed to the landscape. Once you mark a notch where the sun rises on the longest day, that notch will serve as a reliable marker for centuries. The moon's rising points, however, migrate along the horizon over the 18-year cycle. To mark a lunar standstill, you are not marking a single point, but capturing the very limit of a moving target. This suggests monuments with lunar alignments were the result of dedicated, long-term observational science. They were built by cultures who understood that some truths are only revealed through the patience of decades, and who trusted their descendants to continue the watch. This leads to a profound reflective question. Why would a society invest centuries of labor to track a celestial cycle longer than a human lifetime? The answer lies in a worldview that saw human existence as a single link in a much longer chain. By encoding these long cycles in stone, they connected themselves to the eternal, ensuring their community's place within a cosmic order that operated on a timescale grander than any individual. Often, this lunar knowledge was architecturally paired with solar alignments, creating a sacred duality within a single structure. A powerful example is the Najdra temple complex in Malta, built over 5,000 years ago. Here, the lower temple is a masterpiece of solar engineering. Its main doorway is precisely aligned so that on the equinoxes, the first rays of sunrise shine directly down the central corridor, illuminating the innermost altar. Yet this solar temple is just part of the story. Other apertures and alignments within the complex do not correspond to solar events. Some researchers propose they are oriented toward the southern major moonrise or the northern major moonset, capturing the lunar standstills. This pairing of sun and moon in one ritual space represents a profound cosmological concept: the balance of light and dark, male and female, the predictable and the mysterious. It acknowledges that the cosmos is governed by complementary forces, both of which must be honored and understood. Beyond the steady sun and the cyclical moon, the true wildcards of the ancient sky were the wanderers. Venus commanded a different kind of power. Unlike the steady sun or the cyclical moon, this brilliant wanderer followed a rhythm that felt both precise and perilous. To the Maya and Babylonians, Venus was not a distant point of light. It was a celestial actor, a god whose movements dictated the timing of war and the success of the harvest. Its complete cycle, from one appearance as the morning star to the next, lasts 584 days. Tracking this complex dance of appearances, disappearances, and dramatic shifts from evening to morning star required generations of meticulous observation. For these cultures, it was worth the effort because Venus was the star of destiny. In Mayan mythology, Venus was Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, but in its martial aspect, it was also linked to the twin heroes of the Popol Vuh, who ventured into the underworld. Its first gleaming reappearance in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility was not a beautiful sight, it was a dangerous omen. This heliacal rising signaled a time of potential conflict when the warrior god was descending to Earth. Historical records and surviving codices show that Maya rulers meticulously planned military campaigns and royal coronations to coincide with specific phases of Venus, harnessing its perceived power for their own authority. This celestial scheduling turned astronomy into a tool of statecraft. How do you architecturally honor a planet with such a volatile reputation? The answer lies in stone windows and precise alignments. At the Maya site of Uxmal, a structure known as the Governor's Palace features a central doorway that aligns with a distant pyramid. Research suggests that from this vantage point, on the day Venus reached its southernmost extreme in the sky, the planet would have appeared to set directly atop that pyramid, framed perfectly by the palace doorway. This was not a public spectacle like the serpent shadow at Chichen Itza, but a precise, elite observation, a way for the ruler to demonstrate his privileged connection to the cosmic order. Even the famed Parthenon in Athens, dedicated to the goddess Athena, has been analyzed for a potential Venus alignment. Some scholars propose that on the feast day of the Panathenaea, the rising point of Venus would have been directly visible along the temple's eastern axis, linking the civic celebration to the celestial. The most compelling architectural response to Venus, however, is the Caracol Observatory at Chichen Itza. This unique, round tower is pierced with narrow, diagonal slits. These are not decorative. One set of alignments targets the northernmost and southernmost setting points of Venus on the horizon. Another slit is aligned with the summer solstice sunset. The building itself is a permanent, three-dimensional instrument, frozen in stone, designed to catch the light of a specific god at a specific moment. So how does observing a planet's cycle translate into social and political power? It creates a monopoly on timing. When a king or priest alone could predict the dangerous rising of the morning star, they held the keys to understanding the will of the gods. They could declare when to plant for divine favor or when to march for assured victory. Their authority was literally written in the stars, and their architecture proved it. This intricate knowledge of planetary cycles was part of a grander vision, where the planets were not isolated actors but moved against a fixed, starry backdrop that told its own enduring story. Beyond the steady rhythm of planets lies a cosmic clock of staggering scale. The precession of the equinoxes is the granddaddy of all celestial cycles, a slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes roughly 25,800 years to complete. Imagine a spinning top as it begins to slow, its axis tracing a slow, wide circle. Earth does the same. This imperceptible wobble means that over centuries, the backdrop of stars behind the sun at the spring equinox gradually shifts. The sun rises in a different constellation every 2,150 years or so, marking what astrologers call an astrological age, like the age of Taurus or the age of Pisces. While it is unlikely any single ancient civilization observed the full 26,000-year cycle, there is compelling evidence that some were aware of this slow, majestic drift over long spans of time. How could they possibly detect something so slow? The method lies in patient, generational observation. If your culture has meticulously recorded the position of the solstice sunrise against a distant mountain notch for 500 years, and your sacred texts say it once aligned with a bright star that now sits noticeably to the left, you have witnessed precession in action. This long-term shift may have been encoded not in scientific charts, but in the language of myth and symbol. The cyclical myth of the phoenix, which dies in flames and is reborn from its own ashes every 500 to 1,000 years, could be an allegory for the slow death and rebirth of world ages. The vast time cycles of the Hindu Yuga system, which describe epochs of virtue and decline lasting hundreds of thousands of years, may metaphorically represent the grand sweep of precessional eras. These were not literal histories, but profound attempts to describe cosmic time on a scale that dwarfs human generations. This leads to one of the most debated ideas in alternative history, the notion that the Great Sphinx of Giza encodes a precessional date. Some researchers, like John Anthony West and Robert Bovell, have proposed that the Sphinx, with its lion's body, was originally oriented to face the constellation Leo on the spring equinox. Using astronomical software, they note that this alignment last occurred not around 2500 BCE, when mainstream Egyptology dates the Sphinx, but much earlier, around 10,500 BC, during the astrological age of Leo. They argue the erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggest water weathering from a much wetter period in Egypt's past, supporting an older date. While this theory is heavily contested by most Egyptologists, it forces a fascinating question. If a culture did perceive this grand 26,000-year cycle, how would it fundamentally reshape their concept of time and history? It would transform time from a linear march into a vast, repeating spiral. Catastrophes, golden ages, the rise and fall of gods, all could be seen as part of an inevitable celestial turn. This long-term thinking may be reflected in more than just myths. It could be embedded in the very planning of sacred cities, designed not just for the present king, but for a cycle of ages. The orientation of a temple might be set not only for the sun of today, but as a marker for the stars of a future epoch, a message in stone meant for a civilization yet to come. This perspective of deep time suggests our ancestors saw themselves as stewards in a story far longer than their own. But to truly test the limits of their astronomical ambition, we must look for the most sophisticated device they could have possibly built, a machine that could model the cosmos itself. The ambition to mirror the heavens did not stop at temples and tombs. It expanded to shape entire cities, transforming urban grids into maps of the cosmos. This is the first principle of ancient urban planning, the celestial city where streets themselves became aligned with the sun, moon, and stars. Moving from singular monuments to vast, organized settlements, we find that the foundational layout of many ancient cities was dictated by astronomical principles. At the heart of this concept is the establishment of a city's primary axes. In Roman town planning, these were known as the Cardo, the north-south artery, and the Decumanus, the east-west thoroughfare. Their intersection defined the city center, the forum. But these were not merely convenient roads. Their orientation was often carefully chosen based on a solar alignment, such as the sunrise on the day the city was founded, or a stellar alignment toward a significant constellation. This created an ordered urban microcosm, deliberately reflecting the celestial macrocosm. Urban archaeologists note this practice served a dual purpose. While it provided a logical, rectilinear grid for expansion and defense, its deeper function was ideological. By imposing a cosmic order on the landscape, a ruler or priesthood was literally building their vision of a perfect, harmonious world. The city became a physical manifestation of political and divine authority, a constant, daily reminder to every citizen that they lived within a system ordained by the heavens. The four cardinal directions held profound symbolic weight across cultures. In many cosmologies, each direction was associated with a specific god, a sacred color, an element, or a season. North might be the realm of ancestors and cold, south the land of growth and heat, east the direction of birth and sunrise, west the domain of sunset and the afterlife. Aligning a city's grid to these directions was a way to invite the protective power and balance of these cosmic forces into the very fabric of daily life. The technical achievement behind such alignments is staggering. To lay out a perfectly straight road stretching for miles, or to ensure a vast grid remained true across uneven terrain, required sophisticated surveying. Teams of planners would use gnomons or sighting poles and long ropes or chains knotted at precise intervals. By aligning a series of poles over long distances with a celestial target, like a star at its zenith or the sun at a solstice, they could project a perfectly straight line across the landscape. This line would become the sacred axis from which all other measurements flowed. A powerful illustration of this principle is the magnificent city of Teotihuacan in Mexico. Its colossal Avenue of the Dead runs for nearly 2 miles, but it is not aligned to true north. Instead, it is offset by 15.5 degrees east of north. Why this specific orientation? One compelling theory points to the Pleiades star cluster. For the people of Teotihuacan, as for the Nazca, the Pleiades held immense significance, marking agricultural cycles. Research suggests that from the vantage point of the city's central pyramid, the Pleiades would have set directly along the axis of the Avenue of the Dead at a key point in their cycle. The entire urban plan, with its pyramids of the sun and moon precisely positioned along this avenue, may have been a terrestrial map of a celestial relationship, turning the city into a permanent stage for this stellar event. This leads to a reflective question about collective consciousness. Does living within an astronomically aligned city shape a society's world view in subtle, profound ways? When your main street points to a sacred star cluster and your daily commute follows paths laid down by priest astronomers, your sense of place in the universe is constantly reinforced. The order of the heavens is mirrored in the order of your streets, creating a powerful, subconscious harmony between the cosmic and the civic. Some city grids, however, were designed not for a regular alignment, but for a single, dramatic celestial moment that would transform the entire urban space into a theater of light. This intimate knowledge of the land was the second great principle of celestial planning. Long before the first stone was set, the natural horizon itself served as humanity's original observatory. A distinctive mountain peak, a deep notch between two hills, even a solitary ancient tree, these became the fixed markers in a vast, open-air calendar. The key to this system was not in building something new, but in learning to read the existing landscape with profound intimacy. As cultural astronomer Stephen Goldberg explains, this practice creates a unique cultural astronomy for each place, a celestial knowledge that cannot be separated from the specific ridges and valleys a community calls home. To implement this, a society would first identify a perfect sun-watching station. This was a specific vantage point, often a natural rock shelf or a cleared hilltop, that offered an unobstructed view of the critical horizon feature. From this spot, generations of watchers would note exactly where the sun rose on the shortest day of winter or where it set at the height of summer. That precise point on the distant silhouette, once identified, became a permanent celestial marker. Later, this natural observatory was often formalized. A simple shrine might be built at the watching station, or a single upright stone placed to mark the exact spot where the observer's feet should stand. This transformed a personal act of observation into a communal, ritual site, anchoring the calendar to a specific location for all time. The most dramatic expression of this principle is the phenomenon known as the sun dagger. Here, architecture and geology collaborate. A natural slit or crack in a rock wall acts like a camera's aperture. On just 1 or 2 days each year, like the solstices or equinoxes, a narrow blade of sunlight pours through that opening. It travels across a shaded rock face to illuminate a specific petroglyph, often a spiral, a circle, or a human figure, carved there centuries before. For a few brilliant minutes, light and symbol unite in a silent, stunning ceremony. A powerful example of this exists at Fajada Butte in Choco Canyon, New Mexico. High on the butte's face, 3 large stone slabs lean against a cliff. Behind them, ancient artists carved intricate spiral petroglyphs. On the summer solstice, a dagger of light slices directly through the center of the largest spiral. On the winter solstice, 2 daggers of light perfectly bracket it. At the equinoxes, a smaller dagger of light pierces a smaller spiral nearby. This is not a coincidence. It is a meticulously engineered display, using the natural rock formation as part of the instrument. The builders understood the sun's path, the rock's geometry, and the play of shadow with such precision that they could choreograph this annual light show in stone. So how does tying the measurement of time to a specific, immutable landscape forge a deep sense of place and belonging? It roots a people's identity in the very bones of the earth. Their calendar is not a portable object or an abstract concept. It is that mountain, that notch, that shaft of light on that particular rock. To leave that place would be to lose time itself, to become unmoored from the cosmic rhythms that give life order and meaning. This profound bond between land and sky did more than mark the days. It wove entire regions into a sacred geography, where every hill and valley held a story written in starlight and shadow. A temple does not stand alone. It is a single note in a grander symphony composed of mountain, river, and sky. This is the profound concept of sacred geography, where the distinction between a built structure and its natural setting dissolves into a unified cosmic vision. It transcends a simple alignment of stones to the sun. It is the intentional, holistic integration of an entire site into a living landscape already charged with celestial meaning. For ancient builders, the world was not an empty canvas. It was a sacred text, and certain locations were verses of immense power. They sought out places where the sacred, what historian Mircea Eliade called a hierophany, had already manifested. A spring bursting from rock, a peak touching the clouds, a cave descending into darkness, these were not just features, they were portals. The architecture they later built did not replace this natural sanctity. It amplified it, conducting the sacred like a lightning rod. In this worldview, the entire environment became a symbolic map. A winding river might be seen as the earthly reflection of the Milky Way, that luminous celestial river. A towering, solitary mountain became the Axis Mundi, the world pillar connecting earth to heaven. A deep, echoing cave was not just a hollow in the ground, but an entrance to the underworld, the realm of ancestors and regeneration. The temple built upon such a site did not fight the landscape. It collaborated with it, using every element to create a multi-sensory ritual experience. Consider the element of sound. In many sacred sites, the architecture manipulates acoustics in startling ways. A whisper at one end of a stone corridor can be heard clearly at the other, as if the stones themselves are speaking. Clapping hands might produce a chirping echo mimicking a sacred bird, as we heard at Chichen Itza. This was not an accident. It was acoustic engineering designed to make the space feel alive, responsive, and divine during ceremonies that coincided with celestial events. Water, too, was choreographed. Carefully engineered channels would direct spring water or rainfall through temple plazas or into hidden chambers. The sound and sight of flowing water within a stone structure mirrored the cosmic cycles of renewal, tying the ritual to the essential, life-giving force that descended from the heavens as rain. The most powerful illustration of sacred geography may be the Inca capital of Cusco. The city was not laid out on a simple grid. It was designed in the shape of a sacred puma, a powerful guardian animal. The Huatanay River flowing through the city formed the spine of this colossal stone creature. the great fortress temple of Sacsayhuaman, with its zigzagging walls representing the puma's teeth, formed its head. This was not whimsy. The entire valley of Cusco was seen as a cosmologically significant bowl, with the surrounding apus or mountain spirits acting as divine protectors. Roads radiated out from the city like cosmic rays, connecting it to other sacred sites throughout the empire, each positioned within this living, geographical constellation. So we must ask, can we ever truly understand an ancient temple without understanding the mountain it faces, the river that flows beside it, or the specific star it venerates? The answer is likely no. The structure was the final piece of a puzzle that included the land itself. This deep, integrated knowledge was not common property. It was a guarded science, cultivated and advanced by a specialized class of individuals who stood at the very intersection of the earthly and the divine. The knowledge of solstice sunrises and lunar cycles was not held by everyone. It was the guarded domain of a specialized elite, a class of individuals who served as the living link between the community and the cosmos. These were the Priest Astronomers, the true keepers of celestial knowledge. In societies from Egypt to Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, understanding the sky was not a hobby. It was a sacred profession, a form of high science that carried immense political and spiritual weight. Their role was to observe, record, predict, and ultimately to interpret the will of the gods as written in the movements of the heavens. This was a lifelong discipline. Training began in youth, likely through a long apprenticeship that involved rigorous memorization. They had to learn the names and paths of hundreds of stars, the complex cycles of planets like Venus, and the subtle shifts in the moon's journey, all without the aid of written star charts as we know them. This knowledge was often considered secret, initiatory, passed down only within priestly families or select guilds. In ancient Egypt, the priests responsible for the pyramids bore the title Mouth of the Horizon, a poetic name that perfectly captures their function. They were the speakers for the celestial boundary, the interpreters of the sun's daily rebirth. Their predictions dictated the timing of everything from the Nile's inundation ceremonies to the pharaoh's coronation, making them indispensable advisors to the throne. Their tools extended beyond grand monuments. In their hands, simple instruments became keys to the universe. The Merkhit-sighting rod in Egypt, the knotted cord for measurement, and later, devices like the early astrolabe or the Babylonian water clock used for timing star transits were the technology of their trade. With these, they could make the precise calculations needed to lay a temple's foundation or determine the correct night for a pivotal ritual. The power this knowledge conferred was profound. It translated directly into temporal authority. A king who could claim his rule was aligned with the stars, whose coronation was timed to a planetary conjunction, was not merely a political leader. He was a cosmological necessity, a divinely ordained intermediary. This is vividly seen with the Babylonian scholars known as the letter 1, E6 Dups Hachak Aar Enuma Anu Enlil, the scribes of the celestial omen series. These men were the royal astrologers. They meticulously recorded events in the sky, comets, eclipses, planetary positions, and correlated them with events on Earth, from military victories to the death of rulers. Their compiled tablets formed a vast database of celestial prophecy. When a worrisome omen appeared, like Mars nearing the moon, they would advise the king on the necessary rituals to avert the predicted disaster. Their word could postpone a war or launch one, demonstrating how cosmic knowledge was wielded as an instrument of state. This concentration of understanding inevitably created a social hierarchy. The priest astronomer held a position between the people and the unknowable forces that governed their survival. This dynamic prompts a reflective question about the nature of knowledge itself. Does the specialization required to understand complex systems like the cosmos always lead to a separation between those who know and those who do not? In these ancient societies, the answer was often yes. This elite custodianship of the sky provided stability and order, but it was a fragile system. Their meticulously maintained knowledge, passed orally and through fragile manuscripts, could face catastrophic disruption. The collapse of an empire, a natural disaster, or a conquest could scatter these learned groups and shatter their continuity in a single generation. The silent stones they left behind often outlasted the intricate science that positioned them, leaving only the architectural echoes of a lost celestial conversation. That fragile chain of priestly knowledge faced its ultimate test around 1200 BCE. A wave of collapse swept across the Mediterranean and Near East, toppling empires and plunging regions into a centuries-long twilight. The Hittite Empire vanished, Mycenaean Greece fell into ruin, Egypt retreated, weakened. This Bronze Age collapse is one of history's great fractures, and with it, a dark age descended over the stars themselves. What happened to the sophisticated astronomy encoded in those silent megaliths and temple shafts? The answer reveals a stark divide between what was lost forever and what stubbornly endured. The grand architectural expression of cosmology largely ceased. No more pyramids of that scale were built along the Nile. The meticulous solstice alignments of megalithic Europe faded from memory. The knowledge required to orchestrate a sun dagger or to orient a city to a star's helical rising, that intimate marriage of sky, land, and monumental stone, seemed to evaporate. This was the loss of a holistic cosmic vision, where society's very infrastructure was a dialogue with the heavens. Yet not all was forgotten. Historians of science note a crucial shift. While the monumental language of astronomy fell silent, a more portable, practical form of knowledge survived. The needs of daily life demanded it. Farmers still had to know when to plant. Sailors still had to navigate by the stars. This utilitarian astronomy, the recognition of seasonal markers, the names of bright stars for direction, persisted in oral tradition and folk practice. It was less about modeling the universe and more about surviving within it. So, who carried these embers of knowledge through the Dark Age? The carriers were likely not royal scribes, but resilient, mobile groups. Itinerant metalworkers whose trade required long-distance travel and who valued precise measurements may have been one conduit. The mysterious sea peoples, often blamed for the collapses, could also have been unwitting vectors, blending and scattering celestial lore as they moved. Perhaps most enduring was the preservation of knowledge within myth and folklore. The stories themselves became vessels. The Greek constellation myths we know today, Hercules, Orion, Perseus, are now understood by scholars as inherited, simplified versions of far older Mesopotamian and Egyptian star lore. The epic tale of the flood sent by the gods, found in Mesopotamian tablets and later in the Hebrew Bible, may encode a catastrophic memory of celestial events or severe climate shifts that accompanied the collapse. These narratives packaged complex astronomical observations into memorable, transferable forms that could outlast empires. A breathtaking artifact from this era of transition is the Nebra sky disk discovered in Germany. Dating to around 1600 BC, this bronze disk is inlaid with gold symbols representing a crescent moon, a full sun or full moon, stars, and a cluster interpreted as the Pleiades. Arcs along its edge are believed to mark the solstice sunrises and sunsets. This was not a monumental alignment. It was a portable, sophisticated representation of the cosmos, a snapshot of a pan-European astronomical understanding that, within a few centuries, would be buried and forgotten in that region. Its existence hints at a shared celestial language that later fragmented. This leads us to a haunting reflection. How fragile is humanity's collective knowledge when the institutions that guard it crumble? The Dark Age shows that the most vulnerable knowledge is the kind that requires a stable, resource-rich society to express it in stone. Yet, the most resilient knowledge is that which is woven into the practical fabric of life, and the universal language of story. Some of those stories and the star maps they contained did not just survive locally. They embarked on journeys across continents, following trade routes we are only beginning to map, suggesting connections between ancient astronomers that defy our assumptions of isolation. The silent stones of Giza and Chichen Itza pose a profound and enduring riddle. Separated by an ocean and millennia, how did cultures build such strikingly similar monuments to the sky? This puzzle sits at the heart of a fierce academic debate between two compelling schools of thought: Transoceanic diffusion versus independent genius. On one side are the diffusionists who argue that these parallels are evidence of contact, of knowledge carried across vast distances by ancient mariners. Their case is built on a catalogue of startling architectural and astronomical resemblances. Consider the pyramid form itself, a tiered mountain reaching for the heavens, found not just in Egypt, but in the stepped ziggurats of Mesopotamia and the temple mountains of the Maya and Aztec. Beyond shape, there are specific techniques. The corbelled vault, a method of constructing a ceiling by overlapping stones inward until they meet, appears in both Mycenaean tombs and Maya palaces. Even more precise are certain astronomical alignments. Cultures worldwide, from the Greeks and the Maya to the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, held the Pleiades star cluster in sacred regard, using its heliacal rising to mark the agricultural new year. The constellation Orion was often linked to gods of death and resurrection, from Osiris in Egypt to the hero twins in Maya myth. Some researchers point to even more niche parallels, like the concept of a zenith tube, a vertical shaft designed to observe the sun at its highest point, a feature suggested for certain Maya structures and debated for some Egyptian ones. Adventurers like Thor Heyerdahl famously demonstrated the possibility of ancient long-distance travel, sailing his reed boat Ra across the Atlantic to show that such contact was technologically feasible. The navigational prowess of the ancient Polynesians stands as undeniable proof that humans could traverse incredible oceanic distances using only their deep knowledge of stars, currents, and bird flight. This evidence fuels theories of a shared, global source of knowledge, perhaps a lost civilization or a network of seafaring teachers. It suggests a world far more interconnected in antiquity than our textbooks often allow. Yet, the opposing view, championed by much of mainstream archaeology, offers a powerful counter-argument: the concept of independent invention. This perspective, sometimes called isolationism or convergent evolution, holds that the human mind, when faced with the same fundamental challenges and inspirations, will often arrive at similar solutions. The pyramid is not a mysterious blueprint passed between continents, but the most stable and logical way to build something very tall with stone. Observing the same undeniable celestial patterns, the solar cycle, the lunar phases, the brilliance of Venus, would naturally lead to similar mythic interpretations and ritual practices across isolated cultures. The Pleiades' seasonal appearance is a reliable, global signal. It is no wonder many farming societies independently linked it to planting time. The isolationist view is strengthened by the distinct cultural context surrounding these similar forms. An Egyptian pyramid served as a sealed tomb for a god-king's ascent to the stars, while a Mesoamerican pyramid functioned as a living stage for public ritual and sacrifice. The differences in purpose, decoration, and associated belief systems are profound. The controversial idea that the Olmec of Mexico might have used a lunar zodiac similar to ancient China's illustrates the difficulty of this debate. While some see a tantalizing parallel suggesting pre-Columbian contact across the Pacific, others see two cultures independently developing complex calendrical systems based on the same 28-day lunar cycle. So we are left with a reflective question that challenges our view of human ingenuity. Is the architecture of the heavens a universal language waiting to be decoded by any culture that looks up with enough wonder and patience? Or does it point to a forgotten chapter of global exploration? The answer may lie somewhere in between, acknowledging both the incredible capacity for independent discovery and the real, though perhaps sporadic, threads of contact that wove the ancient world together. Regardless of its origin, this celestial legacy was not lost to time. Its final chapters were waiting to be pulled from the sea in the form of a corroded bronze mechanism that would rewrite history. The corroded bronze fragments pulled from a Roman shipwreck were not just an artifact, they were a time machine, known as the Antikythera Mechanism. This intricate assembly of gears and dials, dated to the 2nd century BC, proved that the ancient Greeks had built a mechanical model of the solar system capable of predicting eclipses and tracking planetary cycles. Its discovery shattered the modern assumption that such technological sophistication was impossible before the Renaissance. It forced a profound reevaluation, asking what else we had missed. This realization gave birth to a new science dedicated to listening to the stones, a discipline called Archaeoastronomy. Archaeoastronomy is the meticulous detective work of decoding the past through its relationship with the sky. It is an interdisciplinary field weaving together astronomy, archaeology, anthropology, and history. Its practitioners are not treasure hunters seeking gold, but truth seekers deciphering a celestial language written in alignment and orientation. Their primary tool is a simple, powerful question: was this alignment intentional? To answer that, they must first erase the modern sky. Using sophisticated planetarium software like Stellarium, they can wind back the celestial clock thousands of years, removing light pollution and precisely calculating where every star, planet, and the sun would have appeared on the horizon for the builders. This digital reconstruction is the first step in seeing the ancient sky with fresh eyes, but the digital model is useless without precise earthly coordinates. This is where field survey becomes crucial. Researchers use instruments like theodolites and total stations to measure the exact azimuth, the compass direction of an architectural feature, a doorway, a window, a corridor, or a standing stone. They account for the local topography, noting the specific notch on the horizon that the builder would have seen. Every measurement must be painstakingly accurate, as an error of a single degree can mean missing an alignment entirely over a long distance. The raw data is then compared against the reconstructed ancient sky. Did this corridor point to the summer solstice sunrise 2,000 years ago? Did that window frame the helical rising of Sirius? The true challenge lies in distinguishing a meaningful signal from mere noise. This is where statistical analysis enters. If you measure 100 ancient structures, some will by pure random chance point toward a significant celestial event. Archaeoastronomers use probability mathematics to determine if the number of alignments at a site exceeds what randomness would predict. They look for clusters of orientations. A single building pointing east might be coincidence, but an entire city grid, a ceremonial complex, and 3 nearby temples all sharing the same solar alignment strongly suggests a cultural pattern. Leading practitioners like the late Anthony Aveni constantly emphasize a crucial rule: context is everything. You cannot simply impose modern Western constellations onto an ancient culture that saw completely different patterns in the stars. This practice, sometimes called astroarchaeology, leads to fantastical but false conclusions. True understanding comes from marrying the astronomical data with ethnographic records, local myths, and the archaeological evidence of ritual practice. A typical investigation begins with a hypothesis born from observation or story. Perhaps a local legend speaks of a sun god entering a temple on the longest day. Or an archaeologist notes that the main axis of a ruin seems to face the southeast, an unusual orientation for no apparent reason. The team then travels to the site, often at a specific time of year like a solstice, to conduct their measurements. They must correct for numerous factors. Atmospheric refraction bends sunlight slightly near the horizon, making the sun appear higher than it actually is. The slow precession of the equinoxes has shifted the stellar backdrop over millennia. The horizon itself may have changed due to erosion, forest growth, or even seismic activity. After collecting the data, the long work of correlation begins, matching the stone to the star. A stunning example of this science in action is the work at Nabta Playa in the Egyptian Sahara. This site, over 7,000 years old, was once a seasonal lake used by cattle herders. To the untrained eye, it is a scattering of stones in the desert. But through archaeoastronomy, it revealed a complex stone circle and calendar. Researchers found that the stones aligned with the rising points of key stars, including those in the constellation we call Orion, and with the summer solstice sunrise. This was not the work of a settled pyramid-building society, but of nomadic pastoralists who needed to know when the rains would come to the region. It demonstrated that sophisticated astronomical knowledge existed long before the pharaohs, born from a practical need to survive in a harsh environment. So how does this technology allow us to have a conversation with the builders of the past? It gives us a shared reference point, the immutable sky. When we stand at their temple door on the winter solstice and see the sun rise exactly where their stones directed it, we are witnessing the same event they engineered. For a moment, the millennia collapse. We are not just studying them, we are participating in the precise phenomenon they deemed sacred. This science does more than satisfy historical curiosity. It actively aids in preserving cultural heritage. By understanding a site's celestial function, conservators can better protect its sightlines and orientation, ensuring that the silent dialogue between stone and star is not lost to modern development or neglect. The stones have been waiting a long time to speak. Now we are finally learning how to listen. This newfound understanding of celestial architecture is reshaping how we protect our shared heritage. The stones are only half the monument. The true artifact includes the sky above and the horizon they were built to watch. This holistic view, what experts now call a cultural skyscape, recognizes that an ancient observatory is rendered meaningless if its intended view is lost. Organizations like UNESCO have begun to formally acknowledge this. For a site like Stonehenge, preservation is no longer just about stabilizing the sarsen stones. It involves managing the entire landscape, protecting the sightlines to the solstice sunrise from intrusive development, and even considering the visual impact of distant structures. At Choco Canyon in New Mexico, park management actively works to minimize artificial light, understanding that the same dark sky the ancestral Puebloans studied is a vital part of the site's integrity. This represents a profound shift in conservation philosophy. We are moving from curating isolated objects in a museum case to safeguarding an entire experience, the precise interaction of architecture, land, and cosmos. This effort collides directly with a modern phenomenon that silently erases our cosmic connection: light pollution. The pervasive glow from our cities and towns does more than just hide the stars from amateur stargazers. It actively dismantles the context of every ancient observatory on the planet. The subtle gradations of twilight, the precise moment a star breaks the horizon, the delicate contrast needed to see a sun dagger's beam, all are washed out in a perpetual orange haze. For a culture that oriented its temple to the helical rising of Sirius, our blanket of artificial light permanently obscures that very event, severing the living link the builders engineered. It is not merely an aesthetic loss, it is the loss of a functional key needed to understand the monument's purpose. In response, a global movement has emerged, championing the creation of dark sky parks and reserves. These are protected areas where lighting is carefully controlled to preserve the natural night environment. Places like the Grand Canyon and Death Valley in the United States or Galloway Forest Park in Scotland are now certified sanctuaries of darkness. Their goal is twofold: to allow modern humans to experience the awe of a pristine night sky, and to protect the conditions under which ancient astronomical sites can be authentically studied and appreciated. This preservation has sparked a beautiful modern revival. At many ancient sites, people are gathering once more to witness the celestial events they were built to mark. The winter solstice sunrise at Newgrange in Ireland offers a powerful illustration. Each year, thousands enter a lottery for the chance to be among the small group standing in the tomb's inner chamber at dawn. For those few selected, the experience is transformative. After a night of darkness and anticipation, a slender beam of sunlight begins to creep down the long passageway, slowly illuminating the sacred space exactly as it did for Neolithic builders over 5,000 years ago. In that shared, silent moment, the millennia collapse. The modern visitor is not a tourist, but a participant in an ancient ritual of light, connected directly to a profound human impulse to celebrate the sun's return. Similar gatherings occur at Stonehenge for the solstices, and at Maya sites for the equinox serpent shadow. These events are more than tourism. They are a form of cultural reanimation, where the site's original astronomical function is honored and brought back to life in a contemporary context. So we must ask, in fighting to preserve a dark sky, what exactly are we saving? We are safeguarding more than just a scientific resource for astronomers. We are preserving a fundamental human experience, the capacity for wonder, the sense of our place in a vast universe, and the very canvas upon which our ancestors mapped their myths, their time, and their deepest beliefs. This legacy of looking up continues to spark creative inspiration, driving not only scientists and historians, but also artists, writers, and dreamers to reach, just as those ancient builders did, for a connection written in light. Orbiting satellites now offer a god's eye view of our own history, revealing secrets the jungle has guarded for 1,000 years. This is the new frontier of space archaeology, where technology peers through dense canopy and shifting sands to expose the full scale of ancient ambition. Tools like LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging, work by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft. These pulses penetrate vegetation, bounce off the solid ground below, and return to a sensor. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, computers can construct a breathtakingly detailed three-dimensional map of the bare Earth, stripping away the forest to show every mound, platform, and causeway hidden beneath. The revelations have been staggering. In Guatemala, the Pacanom LiDAR initiative surveyed a vast swath of the Maya lowlands. What was thought to be a landscape of isolated city-states was revealed to be a continuous, interconnected urban and agricultural network of astonishing complexity. The data showed tens of thousands of previously unknown structures, houses, terraces, irrigation canals, and ceremonial centers. More importantly for our story, it showed that these sprawling cities were not randomly placed. Their ceremonial cores, their long causeways known as sakbiab, and the alignments of major temples often followed precise orientations that corresponded with solar and lunar events on a regional scale. This allows for a new kind of analysis, one of overwhelming statistical power. Researchers can now feed the orientation data from thousands of structures into algorithms. Instead of studying one pyramid's alignment in isolation, they can search for patterns across an entire civilization. Do a statistically significant number of temples in a certain valley face the sunrise on the summer solstice? Do ceremonial roads consistently point toward the northernmost moonset? This large-scale pattern analysis moves us from wondering about a single site's purpose to understanding a culture's systematic celestial grammar. One of the most startling discoveries aided by this new perspective is in the Amazon rainforest of Brazil. A site known as the Amazonian Stonehenge, or Rio Grande, is a circle of massive granite blocks, some standing over 2.5 meters tall. From the ground, its layout is difficult to grasp. But from above and through precise surveying, a clear astronomical purpose emerges. One of the stones is aligned with the winter solstice sunset, casting a shadow that disappears through a narrow gap in the circle directly opposite it. This suggests the site functioned as a solar observatory and ceremonial space, built by a sophisticated culture in a region long thought to be only sparsely populated by hunter-gatherers. It forces a complete re-evaluation of the Amazon's ancient past. Satellite imagery has also expanded our understanding of known mysteries. The Nazca lines of Peru are famous, but for decades, researchers believed the geoglyphs were confined to a specific desert plain. New analysis of high-resolution satellite and drone imagery has revealed that the lines, trapezoids, and geometric shapes extend far beyond the traditional zone, stretching into the foothills and connecting to other sites via ancient pathways. This suggests the Nazca geoglyphic system was not a collection of isolated drawings, but a vast, integrated ritual landscape, potentially hundreds of square kilometers in size, all designed to be walked upon and linked to celestial observations from surrounding hills. So, will artificial intelligence and orbital sensors finally solve mysteries that ground-based archaeology could not? They provide a powerful new lens, but they also generate deeper questions. Finding 1,000 new temples aligned to Venus does not tell us precisely why. It confirms the pattern but amplifies the mystery of the cultural impulse behind it. These tools force us to reconsider the purpose of these alignments on a societal level. Was it purely for ritual calendar keeping, or did this celestial ordering serve a more profound psychological function, creating a sense of predictable harmony in a world full of unpredictable forces? The view from space gives us the grand blueprint, but the meaning still waits to be uncovered in the artifacts, the art, and the stories of the people who built this world in conversation with the sky. The linear story of human progress is a comforting one, a steady climb from simple to complex. Yet the stones tell a different tale, one of peaks and valleys, of brilliant knowledge that flickered brightly and then vanished into the long night. This cumulative evidence of sophisticated ancient astronomy forces a profound re-evaluation of what we label as primitive. It introduces a powerful concept, non-linear technological development. This is the understanding that human advancement does not march in a single, upward line. Instead, different cultures in different times developed profound expertise in specific domains: celestial mechanics, acoustics, monumental engineering knowledge that was often later lost, forgotten, or assimilated before resurfacing centuries or even millennia later. Historians of science like James Burke have illustrated how knowledge grows in fits and starts, through a messy web of connections, dead ends, and rediscoveries, rather than a smooth, inevitable ascent. Recognizing the astronomical prowess of these lost civilizations is not about finding lost super science. It is about respecting them as intellectual equals, as cultures that solved complex problems with the tools and frameworks they possessed. They were not primitive precursors stumbling toward our enlightenment. They were contemporaries of their own sky, mastering its language with a rigor we are only beginning to decode. This shift in perspective changes how we interpret everything they left behind. Their myths and legends, long dismissed as mere stories, may in fact be vessels of encrypted scientific data. The epic of a hero battling a serpent in the heavens could be a metaphorical record of a comet's path or an eclipse. A story about a great flood sent by the gods might encode climatic data or the memory of a tsunami triggered by a celestial event. These narratives were not false explanations for a misunderstood world. They were the durable containers for observational truths, designed to be remembered and passed down. Similarly, the construction of their monuments begins to look less like brute force and more like applied genius. The ability to move 100-ton stones across miles, to set them with joints thinner than a credit card, to align entire cities to solar standstills. This suggests a deep, practical mastery of geometry, physics, logistics, and material science that modern engineers still marvel at. They were applying advanced principles, even if their theoretical framework was expressed in the language of divinity and cosmic harmony, rather than algebraic formulas. The most stunning proof of this non-linear development is a corroded lump of bronze and gears pulled from the Aegean Sea. The Antikythera Mechanism, a Greek device from the 2nd century BC, was an analog computer of breathtaking complexity. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses, track the cycles of the Olympic Games, and model the irregular motions of planets. Its existence proves that the technological capability for such intricate gearing and astronomical calculation was not a medieval or Renaissance invention, but was achieved and then lost for over 1,000 years. It is a physical testament to a peak of knowledge that was not surpassed until the Clockwork Age of Europe. This revised history carries a quiet, philosophical weight. If we have so consistently underestimated the intellectual and technical capabilities of our ancestors, what does that say about the latent potential within our own species? It suggests that brilliance is not the sole property of the modern age, but a recurring human trait that manifests in different forms. Our ancestors looked at the same overwhelming sky we see today, and with patience, creativity, and collective effort, they built a conversation with it in stone. Their legacy challenges us to look beyond a simplistic timeline of progress and to see human history as a richer, more mysterious tapestry of forgotten insights and resilient wonder. This realization does more than rewrite the past. It reshapes our inquiry into the most tantalizing possibility of all, the potential for a shared, foundational source of this celestial wisdom that spanned the globe. The silent stones are more than monuments, they are profound psychological statements. Beneath the precise alignments and encoded calendars lies a universal human impulse, a deep-seated need to find order in the chaos of existence. This drive is the first great philosophical implication of ancient astronomy, a quest to transform a vast, intimidating, and unpredictable universe into a structured, sacred, and meaningful home. The psychologist Carl Jung identified a powerful archetype he called the cosmic man, a symbol of the self perfectly aligned with the universe, often represented by mandalas, those circular designs signifying wholeness and a center. The celestial architecture of lost civilizations can be seen as the ultimate mandala, built not on paper but across the landscape. It was a physical act of cosmization, a word scholars use to describe the human process of turning the raw, frightening unknown into a cosmos, an ordered and harmonious world. By meticulously tracking the sun, moon, and stars, these cultures were not just gathering data. They were identifying the stable rhythms within the apparent randomness of storms, droughts, and seasons. They were proving to themselves that behind the veil of chaos, there was a dependable pattern, a celestial logic. Building a temple to capture the solstice sunrise was a way of physically grabbing hold of that logic, of pinning it down with stone so it could not escape. This created more than a calendar, it fostered a shared cultural identity rooted in a common cosmic story. When everyone in a community gathers to watch the sun god descend the pyramid steps, they are not just observing an event, they are participating in a grand, eternal cycle that includes them. Their individual lives gained significance by being linked to this repeating celestial drama. This need for a center is expressed in the universal myth of the world axis or world tree, a sacred pillar connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. This was not a mere idea, it was physically instantiated in architecture. The stepped ziggurats of Mesopotamia were literal stairways to the gods. The pyramids of Egypt were stone mountains reaching for the imperishable stars. Even the soaring steeples of medieval cathedrals continue this ancient tradition, pointing the community's gaze and prayers upward, establishing a vertical connection to the divine. These structures all serve the same psychological function. They create a fixed point in the middle of the existential wilderness, a here from which to understand the everywhere. So we must ask ourselves, in our modern, scientifically detailed yet often spiritually disconnected world, have we lost a sense of cosmic belonging that these ancient cultures so carefully nurtured? We understand the mechanics of the solar system with incredible precision, but that knowledge can feel cold and distant, a fact in a textbook rather than a rhythm in our bones. The enduring allure of these ancient mysteries may stem from a longing for that lost connection, for a sense that our lives are part of a story written in something grander than ourselves. This deep human need for order and meaning inevitably shaped how these cultures understood the very flow of time, leading them to conceive of history not as a straight line but as a vast, repeating circle. Their celestial architecture reveals a second, even more profound implication: the seamless unity of science and spirituality. For the builders of these monuments, there was no distinction between observing the stars and worshipping the gods. To measure the sun's path was to trace the footsteps of a deity. To predict an eclipse was to anticipate the mood of the cosmos itself. Astronomy was religion, and the immense labor of engineering was the highest form of devotion. This represents a holistic worldview that our modern age has largely forgotten, one where empirical observation of celestial mechanics directly shaped theology, ethics, and the very structure of society. Scholars of comparative religion note that in such integrated cultures, to know the sky was to know the divine mind. The patterns were not random physical laws, they were the visible thoughts of a conscious universe. This unity provided the ultimate motivation for expending generations of labor and vast resources. A pyramid was not built for practical utility in any mundane sense. It served no immediate economic or defensive purpose. Its construction was an act of spiritual and cosmic necessity, a collective project to maintain the harmony between heaven and earth, to ensure the sun would keep rising and the rains would return. The modern world often separates the how from the why. We have brilliant astrophysicists who can describe the birth of a star in exquisite mathematical detail, and we have theologians who contemplate the nature of the divine. These are seen as separate domains, even conflicting ones, but in the ancient mind they were one and the same. The precision of their observations did not diminish the sacredness of the event, it enhanced it. Knowing exactly when the serpent's shadow would slither down the pyramid did not make it less miraculous. It made the ritual more potent because it proved their communion with the cosmic order was real and reliable. A powerful illustration of this fusion is the Maya and their relationship with Venus. Their astronomical priests, the Ilhuaca or knowers of the sky, compiled incredibly precise tables tracking the 584-day cycle of Venus. This data was science of the highest order, based on centuries of meticulous record-keeping, but its application was deeply spiritual. The tables were used for practical agricultural planning, yes, but they were equally vital for scheduling the rituals demanded by the god Kukulkan in his martial aspect. The first appearance of Venus as the morning star after a period of invisibility was a dangerous time, a period of celestial war that required a human response. Historical accounts suggest that ceremonies, including those of profound solemnity, were timed to this precise astronomical event. The objective observation of a planet's motion directly dictated the spiritual practice of the community. This leads to a reflective question that lingers in our technologically advanced but often spiritually fragmented age. Can a sense of true scientific wonder exist without an accompanying sense of the sacred? For the Maya, the awe inspired by the predictable yet brilliant wanderings of Venus was inseparable from their reverence for the god it represented. The mystery fueled the observation, and the observation deepened the mystery. In divorcing the cold mechanics of the cosmos from any sense of transcendent meaning, have we gained explanatory power at the cost of a deeper connection? The enduring symbols these cultures left behind, the pyramid, the stone circle, the celestial city, are not relics of a confused or primitive mind. They are monuments to a consciousness that saw no wall between the laboratory and the temple. They challenge us to consider whether our own search for understanding in the universe might be enriched by remembering that the drive to measure the stars and the urge to find meaning in their light may have sprung, millennia ago, from the very same source. The pyramid is more than an ancient shape, it is a persistent idea. Its form echoes in the pointed spires of Gothic cathedrals and the sleek glass of modern corporate headquarters, a testament to a primal urge to reach upward, to touch the transcendent. This is the subtle, enduring legacy of that ancient celestial wisdom, not lost but sublimated. The core symbols and alignments born from watching the sky have woven themselves into the very fabric of our later art, architecture, and calendar, often without our conscious awareness. The knowledge of the solstice did not vanish with the last stone circle priest. It was repackaged, its sacred geometry and cosmic rhythms inherited by new cultures who found their own meanings in the old patterns. Consider the simple, powerful shape of the cross. Long before its Christian adoption, it existed as a nearly universal solar symbol. The equal-armed cross, with its lines pointing to the four cardinal directions, is a map of the world oriented to the cosmos. It represents the sun's path, the solstice and equinox axes, and the meeting point of heaven and earth. This solar cross appears in petroglyphs across the globe, from the American Southwest to Celtic Europe. Symbologists like John Mitchell have traced how this fundamental geometry, along with ratios like the golden mean and forms like the vesica piscis, the almond shape created by two overlapping circles, became the hidden architectural language of later sacred buildings. The great Gothic cathedrals of Europe, like Chartres, were not only aligned to solstice sunrises, but were designed using these precise geometric principles. Their soaring naves and rose windows are a medieval expression of the same cosmic order the Maya or Egyptians sought to capture, a stone prayer built with inherited celestial blueprints. Our modern calendar is a living museum of this ancient astronomy. The timing of our most cherished holidays is not arbitrary, but a direct legacy of prehistoric calendar keeping. Christmas is placed near the winter solstice, the moment of the sun's symbolic rebirth, co-opting older festivals like the Roman Saturnalia. Easter's date is determined by a complex formula involving the spring equinox and the following full moon, a rule established by the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century to resolve a dispute about how to calculate this most important Christian celebration. This lunar solar calculation would have been perfectly familiar to a Babylonian priest or a Maya timekeeper. Even our seemingly secular cross-quarter days persist. May Day or Beltane and Halloween, rooted in the Celtic Samhain, are not random festivals. They mark the precise midpoint between a solstice and an equinox, moments in the agricultural year that held deep significance for pastoral societies, times for lighting bonfires and acknowledging the thinning veil between worlds. We have kept the dates, often forgetting the celestial reason they were chosen. This celestial ordering extends to the very layout of modern power. The street plan of Washington, D.C. is a grand exercise in symbolic geometry, with its diagonal avenues overlaying a grid, creating ceremonial sightlines and powerful focal points. While not all its alignments are astronomically precise, the intent to impose a rational, ordered design upon the landscape echoes the principles of ancient celestial cities. More explicitly, the establishment of the prime meridian at Greenwich in London was a political act of astronomical alignment that divided the globe, a modern assertion that order and time itself emanated from the center of a global empire. To control the map and the clock is to control reality, a truth understood by pharaohs and modern statesmen alike, so we are left with a quiet, pervasive question. In our daily routines, our city grids, and our holiday celebrations, are we still unconsciously following the blueprints drafted by ancient star watchers? The evidence suggests we are. Their legacy is not a collection of dead ruins, but a living undercurrent. The symbols they forged in their dialogue with the cosmos proved so fundamental, so resonant, that they transcended their original cultures. They became part of humanity's shared symbolic language, a silent grammar of shape and cycle that continues to structure our world, connecting the spire to the pyramid, the holiday to the solstice, and our modern search for order to an ancient, star-lit conversation that began with a single stick casting a shadow on the ground. We began as detectives before the Great Pyramid, and we end with a humbling realization: the stones do whisper and the stars still speak through them. This journey has taken us from the solstice markers of Salisbury Plain to the serpent shadows of Maya pyramids, from the silent geoglyphs of Nazca to the cosmic shafts within the Great Pyramid. We have uncovered a global tapestry of human ingenuity, a story woven not with words but with threads of starlight and the weight of mountains. The key takeaway from this exploration is profound yet beautifully simple. The astronomy of lost civilizations and its influence on early architecture reveals a shared human project, one that spanned continents and millennia. It was the relentless drive to build meaning, to impose order on chaos, and to forge a tangible connection to the eternal, using the most reliable reference our species has ever known: the cosmos itself. This knowledge fundamentally challenges the linear narrative of progress. It asks us to see history as richer, more mysterious, and our ancestors not as primitive, but as insightful contemporaries of their own sky. They were master observers, engineers, and philosophers who expressed their deepest understanding of reality in a language of stone and alignment. So reflect for a moment on how this changes your view. The next time you see a photograph of an ancient ruin, or even step outside to glance at the night sky, remember the layers of intention. That pyramid is not just a pile of rocks, it is a frozen prayer. That stone circle is not just a mystery, it is a calendar waiting for its date. The sky above you is the same dome of stars that served as the ultimate blueprint for the world's first architects. If this journey through cosmic architecture has sparked your curiosity, there are endless enigmas left to explore. Consider delving deeper into the hidden patterns of history by subscribing for more investigations into the past's greatest puzzles. And share your thoughts below. Which astronomical alignment we discussed fascinates you the most? Is it the precision of the Great Pyramid's shafts, the theatrical descent of Kukulkan, or the patient lunar tracking of the stone circles? Look up tonight. In that simple act, you participate in the oldest human tradition. You are gazing at the same infinite canvas that has inspired wonder, guided journeys, and compelled us for thousands of years to build our world in its magnificent, silent image.